Hello, YouTube. So, right now I am going to be doing a tier list on season one of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. You all know, like at least most of us know what this show is. Of course, it was adapted from the Railway series, written by Reverend Wilbert Awdry, and it was adapted by Britt Allcroft and David Mitton. And let's see, if you want to know more, let's see, you can definitely watch the Thomas retrospective by the Unlucky Tug. But yeah, I'm not going into detail about the production. Um, right now, I'm just going to be ranking all the episodes um, based on how much I like them. So yeah, um, the lowest I have is D. Um, let's be real, guys. I don't think any of the episodes are F tier, so we won't be needing it. So let's start off, and we're going to be going in order, starting with Thomas and Gordon, also known as Thomas Gets Tricked if you live in America. The episode that started it all. We're introduced to Thomas, Gordon, and pretty much the world of Sodor in general. Yeah, we get the idea like Thomas is a cheeky little prick who thinks he can get away with anything. And Gordon seizes an opportunity to get back at him for all the and it's great. As a pilot episode, it served its purpose. We get an idea of who Thomas is and what his personality is. So for that, I'm gonna give it an A tier, just for holding that significance from the rest of the series. Um, yeah, not much more I can say there. Next we have Edward and Gordon, or Edward Helps Out. Um, Here we pretty much know who Gordon is, and here we're introduced to Edward. We get Edward is an older engine who isn't used much, and Gordon is some arrogant hotshot who, of course, he thinks he can get away with everything, just like Thomas in a way. But yeah, and we also get the ever classic Gordon's Hill that leaves quite an impact on the series. Um, this one is pretty much two stories meshed into one. It's part of Edward's Day Out. Excuse me, and we also get the Edward and Gordon part where Gordon gets stuck on the hill, and Gordon, of course, is ungrateful for the help, and he thinks he did it on his own. Just yeah, feel bad for Edward in this one. Um, it's hard to say. I'm gonna give this an A tier as well. So we're starting off pretty solid, I think. Next, the sad story of Henry, or Come Out Henry. Here we're introduced to Henry, and we get the idea he's kind of this selfish engine who doesn't care about anybody but himself. Doesn't care about getting his passengers home. He just cares about his paintwork. Um, I think his punishment here was justified, if I'm being honest. Of course, this is also our introduction to Sir Topham Hatt into the series as well. And still, he we get some funny gags with him. about not helping push or pull him out, or, like my doctor has forbidden me to pull or push. And I think for the time being, he was justified in breaking him up in a tunnel, even though in reality that is a little silly. Because a working railway wouldn't do this and just block their main line. Um, it's not as good as the other two. I'm gonna give it a B tier. I just, even though there is this misconception that Henry died in the tunnel, um, and we know that's not true because of the next episode, Edward, Gordon, and Henry, or Henry to the Rescue, where Henry gets let out of the tunnel and Gordon bursts his safety valve, and Edward is not strong enough to push the train on his own. So they have no choice but to leave Henry there. Or, sorry, have no choice but to have Henry help. Yeah, because it's, by this point, it's clear that Henry has learned his lesson. In Sad Story, he's just a prick. He was shut up in the tunnel because for only caring about his paintwork. Here, we like him a bit more. This episode, I think, is also a B tier. Of course, not the greatest of season, like not the greatest episode ever, but, it makes us like Henry a bit more. And that's what I appreciate. Thomas's Train, or A Big Day for Thomas. I don't really like this one that much. It is a little lame in comparison to other episodes. It's like Thomas should have known that he wasn't pulling anything, and he went quite a distance, before he realized it. I think he only went as far as that signal box. I think it wasn't translated well from the original story, because he didn't go that far in the original story, and The Adventure Begins also made it worse, but that's something else. But here we were introduced to, like, Thomas has desires, like, but that's what I like about this, is that Thomas has desires. He doesn't just want to shunt coaches all the time. Like, as we saw from Thomas and Gordon, I guess he plays tricks on the big engines just to have a little bit of fun, because all that shunting must be very tiresome for him. And of course, Henry gets ill and he gets his chance. Honest, but still, I'm probably going to give it a D tier, simply because of how silly it is. But yeah, there's not really much more to say, is that it's just silly in concept. But it's not horrible. It's not F. None of the episodes are, as I just said. Thomas and the Trucks. This is the episode that gave us that line, "I want to see the world." And we're pretty much introduced to the trucks, the troublesome trucks in this episode, and how how troublesome they can be, as Thomas realized that they can they can do some serious damage. And of course, Sir Topham Hatt is there to scold him. It's like he did get it there. He did get to his location, but that didn't mean it wasn't an easy journey there. It's like Tommy, he's a bit more sympathetic here than he was in this first two. It's like he wants to please his controller. He may be a little prick, but at least he has some respect for authority. I think this one is an A tier. I'll put it right there. We have Thomas and the Breakdown Train, or Thomas Saves the Day. This is the finale in the original Thomas book, Thomas the Tank Engine book. We're introduced to James in this episode, and he has his famous crash in the field off screen, and Thomas saves him. And knowing the damage that troublesome trucks can cause, he doesn't hesitate in saving James using the breakdown train. This, I feel like, is a very it's definitely one of the more influential episodes, as after this episode, a lot changes. He gets to leave the yard and is now awarded his own branch line. Yeah, this is a solid A tier. I'm going to put this at the top of A for now. He gets his coach. Thomas gets his coaches, Annie and Clarabelle. Well, and his branch line. So, yeah, not much more to say there. James and the coaches. I'm not the biggest fan of meshing two stories into one. We get part one. Get part one with James ruining the Fat Controller's new top hat, and then the second part, which is a little bit more memorable, James tearing a hole into one of his coaches, and it needs to be repaired with a bootlace. Of course, we get that one stubborn passenger, Jeremiah Jobling, who has a bootlace, and he just refuses at first. It's okay. It's definitely not A tier or anything, but it's all right for what it is. It's B tier. I'll give it a B because gives us our first insight as to who James is as a character. Now we get troublesome trucks, or foolish freight cars. Now it's James's turn to deal with troublesome trucks, and of course he has his own. It's about James having his own difficulties with them, but he gets the job done, and he wins over Sir Topham Hatt in this episode, which is nice. And I love he's got some fun banter with Thomas in this. And I love the line from the trucks, "We want a proper engine, not a red monster." So, but it doesn't quite pack a punch in the same way the others do. So for that, this one is also going to be B tier. Yeah. Now we have James and the Express. Um, I think this one is another B tier. This is where, while James may have won Sir Topham Hatt over in the previous, um, Gordon and Henry still tease him. And of course, Gordon gets sent down the wrong line. James steps in and helps him. But I will say this, though. It's definitely one of the best George Carlin narrations. Probably his line had that funny line, perhaps it was instinct. Yeah, I just love the way he delivered it. So yeah, this sits at B tier. Thomas and the Guard. Not really a whole lot of story in this episode, but we are introduced to Thomas's branch line in this, and we get our first glimpse into how it works. But other than that, like, there isn't much story. Of course, Thomas is a dick to Henry, saying like, "You're too fat. You need exercise." Of course, and then he leaves his guard behind, and then the guard catches up. Thomas apologizes, and everything's all good. C tier. I give this is a C tier. Thomas goes fishing. Yes. This one's a good one. Thomas has some desire to go fishing, and of course the other engines think he's nuts, and then Thomas gets a little more than what he bargained for when he gets fish in his boiler. I like that later seasons follow up on Thomas not liking fish that much. And yeah, I love how it all got its start in this episode. It's A or B. I'll put it in B. It's solid. Solid for what it is. And now we have Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. Okay, so we get our first winter episode. And we're also introduced to Terrence the tractor. And Thomas is just, man, he really is a dick to everyone who he first meets. Of course, he insults Terrence, and when the snow came, of course, this was implied to be his first winter on his branch line, and he hates wearing that snowplow. And another element of Thomas's character that carried into later seasons. And of course, Thomas then gets stuck in a snowdrift, and who was there to help him but Terrence? I'll give this A tier. I like it. And the visuals are pretty good. I like the winter visuals. I don't know. Maybe there will be another episode that will have nice winter visuals. Who knows? Thomas and Birdie. Ah, yes. The ever iconic Thomas and Birdie. This was the first episode I ever watched as a kid. Because I had the 10 years of Thomas VHS. I like how all the intermissions had all the kids at Strasbourg. And this was the first episode featured. I think I have a lot of nostalgia for this one, and again, we're introduced to who Bertie the Bus is officially. He did appear at the end of the previous episode that I just talked about, albeit briefly. But here this is our official introduction to Bertie, and we learn a little bit more about him, how he's a very competitive bus, and Thomas has a very competitive nature to him. And the two race, and they have a good time. I think just for nostalgia alone, just carries this episode for me. I'm putting it in S tier. I love it. I just love it. Great. Next is Tenders and Turntables. I like how the narrator explains the concept of turntables. And of course, Gordon is just complaining, as per usual, about facing backwards isn't the proper thing, and he rants to Thomas about this, only for high winds to cause Gordon to not balance on the turntable properly, and he's forced to pull his train backwards. And then James spins around like a top. I always love the scene of James spinning around as like, whoa, and I just love the eye rolling, which is just simply iconic. And it gives Gordon, James, and Henry for some reason, an idea to strike. This one isn't as memorable. I mean, at least it is, but like, I'll put it in B because, it's good. I like it. Next, Trouble in the Shed. Another influential episode. Here, Gordon enacts his plan of going on strike, which leads Edward into making Edward do all the work on his own, and all the others just hissing at him. Of course, Sir Topham Hatt sees this opportunity, and he decides that another shunter is needed, and that shunter would be Percy. This is Percy's introduction to the series. And yeah, it's quite a big event that happens in this. So for that, it's going in A tier, I think just behind Breakdown Train. I promise, I swear there will be more S tier episodes, I promise. Percy runs away. Now we get some insight as to who Percy is. He's kind of this cheeky little scamp, just like, in a way, like Thomas, and of course he can be a little careless sometimes, and we see this when he's hanging around the main line without alerting a signalman, which leads to Gordon almost killing him. Of course, Percy is then startled. Of course, this is where the inconsistency of Lower Suttery being after Gordon's Hill and not Maron came from. Because location-wise, everything else was consistent. But this is the glaring one. But still, that doesn't really matter. That's not really a factor in my ranking. It's a fun one. This one is also A tier. I think I'll put it here. Actually, there. There we go. Next is Cole. We learn a little bit more about Henry. Yeah, about how he has a warped firebox and he needs special coal to operate better. And when still very simple in concept. I mean, pretty much all these episodes are so far. And I like it, you know. Henry operates a bit better, and he gets a little one up on Thomas for after insulting him back in Thomas and the Guard here. I think just for that, I'll give it a B tier. I'll probably put it behind fishing. Next, the Flying Kipper. Yes. Our very first on-screen crash is in this episode. And what a great one they started with. The music and visuals and the crash, they all carry this episode and overall Henry's journey all comes to a head here. So for that, all those reasons, S tier. But was that really a surprise? All right, and whistles and sneezes. It's an okay one. Again, I've never been very keen on meshing two stories into one. But I do like that Henry, he gets the one up on Gordon and he gets those boys that drop stones on him back. So yeah. But I quite like this one. It's like, go Henry, go. That I'll put it in A tier. Now, Toby and the Stout Gentleman. And here we are introduced to Toby in this. A brand new character, and in a different setting. Where, you know, Sir Topham Hatt is taking a vacation with his grandchildren, and he meets Toby for the first time. You learn that Toby's line is slowly being replaced by the lorries, which puts him out of business. We know he took trucks to all the farms and factories, and he's been seeing less and less traffic by rails, and it's sad. But it has a happy ending. I think I'll give this A tier as well. And then Thomas in Trouble. I think this is also A tier. We see Thomas getting in trouble with the police, with that grumpy police officer. You know, saying that he isn't allowed up up that part of the line without his wheels being covered. And of course, Sir Topham Hatt acting accordingly, stating that we need a tram engine. And it's like, oh, I just met one from the previous story. I'll try to buy him. And it's just happy coincidence. And I like how Thomas didn't exactly like Toby at first, but then Toby rang his bell to distract the policeman, and then that's when Thomas said, "Hey, he's all right. He's all right." Next, we have dirty objects. Yes. Another S tier. I think of all the stories that involve a character being a dick to another character and then ends up getting into an accident, this is always the first one that comes to mind for me. I don't know why. It's very perfect in structure. James sees Toby. He's rude. Toby asks, why are you rude?" And of course, James is just like, "I'm a splendid engine. You ever see my paint getting dirty?" And a great crash, too, not to mention. Of course, but James learned not to run his mouth off and to Toby, because it definitely bit him in the ass. Off the rails. My gosh, another S tier episode. Of course, the idea of Gordon just falling into a ditch is just so hilarious to me, all because he refused to pull a goods train. I like how this is pretty much the boiling point for Sir Topham Hatt. Because prior to this, Gordon has gotten himself into so many incidents, just like getting stuck on a hill here, leading a strike, bursting his whistle, and jamming his safety valve, getting sent down the wrong line. And this is his biggest mistake that he's made all season. And it's just wonderful. Well, to see, and yeah, I think it's great. And now we have down the mine, which is somewhat a continuation of Off the Rails. Now it's Thomas's turn to get himself in trouble, and Gordon helps him. Yet another S tier episode. This is the perfect finale to season 1. I like the idea of it starting with Thomas and Gordon, and it ends with Thomas and Gordon. I mean, both of them get into incidents that humble them throughout the whole season. Of course, Thomas getting fish in his boiler, losing control of trucks, getting stuck in a snowdrift, getting written up by a policeman, leaving his guard behind. But here, Thomas and Gordon finally put their differences aside and form an alliance, and it's very wholesome. This and Kipper, definitely one of the best episodes of the whole show, if I'm being honest. And now the actual finale of season 1, Thomas's Christmas party. It's okay. I would have preferred Paint Pots and Queens. But yeah, I like that. It's a Christmas, and it's very heartwarming. Um, the Mrs. Kindly's Christmas flashback did make me think I missed an episode back then. Of course, Thomas, Percy, Toby, and Terrence all help Mrs. Kindly, which which is very nice. Like it very much like Mrs. Kindly's Christmas was kind of the part one, and this is essentially a part two. It's like we never got the part one. So for that, it's C tier. C tier. It doesn't really work that much for me. And there you go. This is my tier list for season one. Um, I know our everyone's opinions differ from each other, and if you disagree with the way I ranked things, you're definitely allowed to. So, yeah. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you want me to make more, I may do season two, season three, and onwards. I definitely might. Thank you, and bye.